Hello, welcome to Higher Reality Vision, Ideas That Matter. Today we will talk about the profound implications that super artificial intelligence at a certain point will have on the development of human mind and human consciousness. And my today's guest, Professor Thomas Lombardo from the Center of Future Consciousness, will dive deep with us into what it means that we connect more and more with these intelligences, what we need to take into account, how we have to evolve in a way mentally, emotionally, and how wisdom will be a very important ingredient in this complete concept of going into the future together with machine intelligence and artificial intelligence. So I'm very happy to talk with Thomas Lombardo, who is really a professional in these areas for many years, and we will also get a glimpse why science fiction might be a very interesting aspect in guiding us towards this purposeful evolution. Welcome, Professor Thomas Lombardo. Yes, before we start, thank you so much for giving me the chance to ask you some questions. I'm very excited about it because actually, I guess, the topics that I like to discuss with you are some of the most profound and most interesting topics we are in contact as humanity with right now. And before we dive into the session, I would love to have a small introduction of you, because actually when I crawled through all the information, it's so much stuff that you did in the last year, so many books you wrote. Maybe you just give a small introduction about yourself.
Okay. I was educated with a PhD in psychology, but with a master's in philosophy of science. For a number of decades, I was a professor of psychology, a dean of a psychology school, worked in mental health as a chief psychologist. And about 25 years ago, I became interested in the topic of the future. And I became a member of the World Future Society and the World Future Study Federation. I began to write and publish articles on the future, as well as eventually started to publish some books on the future too. And I had a diverse set of interests with respect to the future, our consciousness of the future of science and technology, the future evolution of the human mind. I even did some stuff on the future of religion and spirituality too. So in the last, what is it now? Roughly the last dozen years, I've published 8 books on the future or pertaining to the future. The last 2 books I have published are, here's one of them, Future Consciousness.
Yeah.
This came out in 2017 and won the Network Book Prize Award for the year. And then being released in exactly 1 week from now.
Oh, wow.
This is coming out, Science Fiction, The Evolutionary Mythology of the Future.
Yes.
This is volume 1. And this will be the first volume of a 4-volume series on the evolutionary history of science fiction. Science fiction being one of my really long-term interests from when I was a kid, and I stayed with it, and obviously science fiction is connected into the topic of the future. In February, I have another book coming out, which is a small little book called The Pursuit of Virtue, How to Create a Good Future. And that'll be a small little book. These books are much bigger, but that one will be coming out in February. And hopefully within about another year, volume 2 of the science fiction series will be coming out. Volume 1 goes up to the end of the 19th century, and volume 2 will cover up from Jules Verne to Olaf Stapleton. I'm the director of the Center for Future Consciousness, the director of the Wisdom Page, and professor emeritus of psychology, philosophy, and the future from Rio Salado College. That's quick. I can say more, but that's, yeah. I tried to do 40, 50 years there very fast.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's an introduction.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a very profound list of very interesting material, and actually this is what excites me about it, because many of the topics I'm really interested in. It's really fascinating. As you might know, I'm originally coming from the digital world as a digital artist, and having worked on big movie projects and stuff. And actually, through my own process, I dive deep into transpersonal work, transpersonal psychology, and also worked as a therapist. And now these things are coming together. So my passion for science fiction, my interest in psychology, and the digital world are merging right now. And this is pretty exciting because the topic of, or the spiritual implications of artificial intelligence, or super artificial intelligence, super intelligence, are pretty interesting for me right now. Because yes, we have on one side, you see the technical stuff. In my opinion, I have been working as a consultant for companies like for 3 or 4 years now in this field. And actually in the last 1.5 years, all this artificial intelligence is kind of growing pretty fast. It's really quick now, you know, we're making huge progress in the last 1 or 2 years. It seems, you see, everything is speeding up right now. So I'd like to talk with you a little bit today, not so much about what is going on right now, because we all know navigation is working, you know, like spam filters are working, but what is really going on in the future? And for me, when I stumbled across your work, it was on Thinking Aloud when you had the interview about the why cyborg. And yes, and it was, you know, I was in a phase where I tried to understand, okay, how can I connect machine intelligence with things like the soul or heart beating aliveness of a human being? How can these things merge? How is it possible that we sustain our sovereignty as a soul, so to speak, whatever soul is, when we connect with machine intelligence? And I'm interested in what your ideas about this are.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer because there are some maybes in this. But as a starting point, number one, I see human beings as inherently cyborgs, and that we have been cyborgs for thousands of years, in the sense that we are functional syntheses of the biological and the technological. So as soon as we began to create and develop tools and other forms of instrumentality, we became cyborgs. And we're cyborgs even at this point in time. The term cyborg, though, is a term that is more recent, and it's used when we want to really emphasize or highlight how technological devices are integrated and become part of a functional human being. And they could be brain implants or prosthetics or anything that's going to enhance or in various ways contribute to the functioning of a human. Now, my point with the why cyborg is that we have been cyborgs, but the goal here is to be why cyborgs, in the sense that when we create and guide the creation and use of technological enhancements of any kind, we should guide that creation with wisdom, and we should think in terms of how those creations, those technologies will enhance our capacity for wisdom. That is, technological evolution has to be guided by some set of principles and values and human ideals. And the concept that I think captures best human holistic competence, mental holistic competence, is the concept of wisdom. So if our technologies can be guided by wisdom, can be used to facilitate wisdom, enhance it in us, that should be the direction we should go in, as opposed to developing technologies that will serve superficial, frivolous, or even self-destructive ends in humans.
Yes.
So we have to have some. We have to have some set of ideals that are ethical, philosophical, psychological, holistic, for the inevitable, or it's not necessarily inevitable, but the highly probable further evolution of us as cyborgs. Now, when Vernor Vinge wrote the original article on the singularity back in 1992, he brought up the issue of, as we increasingly advance our technological enhancements of our biological core, whether the technological enhancements will end up dwarfing or washing out or making minimal whatever biological core there may be within us. So in the long run, even if we see the biological and the technological as forming a functional marriage, the inevitable continued evolution of the technological will kind of dwarf the biological core that we started from. Although the biological, of course, we can begin to theoretically modify too with genetic engineering or any other kind of biological engineering as well. So I would imagine that in the long run, we would want to not just maintain, but we'd want to evolve what we call the conscious, humanistic, personal, philosophical, and some people might use the word spiritual core of humanity, but it's going to evolve within a context of a purposively constructed technological instrumentality will be embedded in it. Yeah, to the point where maybe we will have new bodies, okay? But we keep that set of philosophical, ethical, humanistic ideals as, excuse me, my phone is ringing. I thought I had it turned off. Okay, all right, it stopped. We keep that wisdom center there because we want to have, if we're going to be much more mentally, physically adept and powerful and adaptable, then we better have a admirable core and keep a sense of human direction on an admirable human direction on the ongoing evolution of ourselves. Let me say one last thing. I'm sorry that I'm going on so long, but this is a very elaborate question. I also believe that humans engage in purposeful evolution, and they have for a long time. That is, we don't just, we aren't creatures that evolve just simply through random mutation and natural selection, but we guide change through the use of our conscious minds. We set goals, we manipulate nature, we manipulate ourselves. So for a long time, we have been engaging in the purposeful evolution of ourselves, and that's in fact what society is, that's in fact what our ethics is, that's in fact what our rules of thinking, our behavior, all of that, our sense of personal identity. And so it seems to me inevitable, given our very nature, that we are going to guide not only just the technological dimension of ourselves purposively evolve it, but we will continue to guide and evolve the psychological, the mental, the social, the ethical dimensions of ourselves too. So when I say that the wise cyborg, it should be our goal, what I mean by that is we should be purposively evolving our minds and our bodies so that we are becoming increasingly wise as our power and our capacities increase, so that we are able to guide our powers and capacities in an ethical, humanistic fashion, as opposed to a destructive or stupid or shallow fashion.
Yes, yes. So very, very nice. So it's a very positive view of the things that we are heading to, and in my own personal belief, I can completely relate to it. I'm pretty sure that most of the people that are living right now have a very positive future in their mind. They want to have a positive future, and they do the stuff to make a better place or better world, maybe for themselves, their families, their organizations, or whatever. When we are talking about the wisdom traditions, you see the process of refining consciousness, of growing into wisdom, we see that in all traditions, for example, the self-reflection, the practice, for example, the meditation, the yoga stuff, whatever you can do, is very important for the individual to, for example, develop certain qualities like moral qualities or spiritual qualities, like the siddhis, like maybe telepathic qualities, really like advancing as a human being without technological material. And now we come to the point where we say, okay, we want to get wiser, please implant the chip, then I will connect to the cloud, I will have an IQ of 1000, and then I will get wise. And maybe I don't have to meditate so long, maybe I can telepathically go forward electronically, but not so much on the spiritual plane. So how do you bring this into connection? Because for 5,000 years, we needed to go to the cave and meditate to get more bright, to get more sophisticated, intelligent. And now we can just make a download into our consciousness to get a little bit more, so to speak, a little bit more efficient. So how does it work together? Do we need to be enlightened before we get the super artificial intelligence? Or will the super artificial intelligence help us to get enlightened?
Okay, you already started to answer your question, because this, in fact, is a reciprocal loop. In fact, I was already beginning to answer that question in what I was saying earlier, that with increased memory and speed of thinking or information processing capacities, through the use of technology, that is good, but we still have to be able to coordinate and guide and direct those capacities toward ethical and desirable and wise ends. So yes, give me the chip so I could think faster or remember better, but thinking faster and remembering better doesn't make for a better person in and of itself.
Yes.
You could be an intelligent, unethical individual, okay? So the various traditions, philosophical, religious, spiritual, psychological, self-actualization, self-development movements, through the ages, in those various practices, the conscious mind or self-reflectively works on developing their conscious abilities or capacities or level of enlightenment through all the different kinds of exercises, practices, etc., that have been developed over the decades. And that's got to stay there. because we still need to be the core and guider of the technologically enhanced brain, body, whatever it turns out to be. So it's not like it's going to go away. In fact, I'll give you one important thing to consider here. Let's take human memory. Human memory, when it is intelligent and problem-solving oriented and creative, is memory that the person has integrated into other things that they already know, so they could use that memory of information, ideas, to be productive and thoughtful and relevant to whatever's going on around them. If I were to just simply outsource my memory onto a chip or a machine, the memory, the information I haven't integrated it. And if I haven't integrated it, it's just things I could look up, but I don't really have a super enhanced functional memory if I'm just simply putting it on a chip or on a machine. It still requires me to have to think through all of that stuff and integrate it into my conscious mind so that it becomes functional, useful. So even if I can have at my disposal a lot of additional information on chips and machines wired into me, and even if I could think faster, I'm still going to have to learn how to coordinate and use all of that and use it in a good way. And I'm still back to being self-responsible, by conscious mind being self-responsible for being able to coordinate and manipulate all of those enhancements I'm going to get. So it's like in the Matrix, where the character all of a sudden has downloaded into his brain the ability to perform adeptly various martial arts. Yes. I don't see that happening. I still think even if you could input the necessary memories, you still have to practice it and integrate it into your knowledge, into your conscious mind. So which is going to come first? It's like a chicken and the egg. In terms of the more enhancements I get, the better I'm going to be able to integrate and use that information. But I also have to be able to self-responsibly develop my conscious mind so I can guide and direct what kind of enhancements I'm going to want and how I'm going to use them.
Yes, I see. This is very interesting. When we see what is going on right now in the technical side of the game, because a lot of people that are coming from the technological side, from Silicon Valley, they do not tell us about these processes. They just say tech will solve it and that's it. You see, and what I think is really interesting is that many of the things, for example, when we just see side by side as spiritual ideas and technological ideas. We have, for example, in the spiritual realm, we have the Akashic records. Now we have the cloud or the blockchain where everything is stored. Or we have, for example, things like Ethereum, which is a platform for smart contracts. It's very much related to the ether, the all-connected stuff that brings everything together. Or we have some platforms that are called like DAO. They are very spiritual names for these super new technologies, for these super new artificial intelligence platforms. And I guess a lot of people will just, in a way, take the one thing and use it as the other, while we have, like, for 5,000 years a tradition of being able to connect to the ether and communicate here from a deeper sense of ourselves, connected to our soul, really reaching outwards with our consciousness towards the soul, whatever this is, or the higher realms. And now we just drop into the blockchain and connect there.
Okay, now we're going to have to get a little bit ontological here.
Yes.
We're going to have to get into the question of what is consciousness, what is the mind, what is the physical world, how do they connect together, how do they relate? Item number one, I think, is that at this point in time, we still don't have a decent answer to the question of what is consciousness and how does it arise within a physical universe or even an evolutionary physical universe? But it does seem to me, and some people would disagree with this, that consciousness is always embodied. It's always in a physical instantiation, a physical form. So I have a conscious mind, but I have a conscious mind within a physical body. And this physical body, in some intimate sense, is necessary and connected with this conscious mind that I have. Now, I don't use the word spiritual, but I use the expression conscious mind, and I use the expression, reality or depths of reality.
Yeah.
So I think that when we talk about technological enhancements, we should keep in mind that this isn't anything different fundamentally than the fact that my body is a very complex, at the very least, integrated information processing mechanism with various sensory or perceptual interfaces. And with all that machinery, in quote, a personalized intelligent consciousness emerges out of it, but that personalized intelligent consciousness is able to control this physical body in a kind of a loop fashion. So technology isn't antagonistic to what some people would want to use the word spiritual, because the physical and the conscious, in some sense, are intimately connected together, and they seem to influence each other. And we still don't even have a good answer to how that actually happens. So I could, even though I don't use the word spiritual, I could imagine that one could have, as Ray Kurzweil said it, spiritual machines. In fact, we're a spiritual machine if you want to use the word spiritual. I would say we're conscious machines, but we got to be careful about what we mean by a machine. But we are definitely conscious, complex, physical, evolving, dynamical entities that have a self and have awareness and try to reach out and understand the universe in some sense. The universe is obviously even facilitating this. There's the idea that we are the universe becoming conscious of itself, okay, through these physical bodies that we have, which are going to get much more complex now as we begin to enhance them through biotech, information tech, computer tech, virtual reality tech, all of that. That was sort of a long-winded answer to, or not an answer, it was sort of like a commentary on the question of, is the conscious, spiritual, humanistic compatible with the technological, physical, scientific? And yes, they are compatible. They are connected together, although we're not really clear yet philosophically or scientifically how.
Yes. Yes, and it's a very a delicate point, because it's really like where machines and humans are touching each other. It's really this tipping point that is happening. And what I think is really interesting about it is that sometimes it feels so difficult to bring these together, because, for example, I'm as a person on a path of seeking understanding. I had a lot of mystical peak experiences, experiences that were really like out of the boundaries of normal consciousness. And of course, when you have experiences like this, or near-death experiences, the idea of consciousness within the body gets a little bit shaken in a way, because you realize, okay, maybe this is just one perspective of many others that are possible. And for example, when we are talking, for example, about super intelligence or machine intelligence on a very highly sophisticated level, the question here is, will this intelligence just be stored on a technical device, or will it be able to communicate, maybe even telepathically with us, because it is connecting through subatomic particles with us directly, because it has such a huge grip onto reality, onto the physics of reality, that we do not need an interface or a CPU or a server room, but just experiencing this intelligence everywhere, like we are doing it, so to speak, with the consciousness of the cosmos right now.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever yes, you could have, when we use the word technology, it's still, we could have a limited notion of what is a technological device. What if, to go from your angle on this, the technological device that's utilized for the expression and empowerment and realization of consciousness were a star or a solar system or a galaxy. There's a medium there. It's an extremely complex and rich and granular reality that goes down to the quantum level, but you could envision that whole thing becomes the body of a conscious mind. The conscious mind becomes embodied in something that we wouldn't necessarily think of as being either a biological brain or a technological device, but permeates through a vast physical expanse at a subatomic and energetic astronomical level. Yes. All I'm saying is, when we talk about it, I talk about embodiment. I don't necessarily mean a identifiable biological entity or a machine. It could be it could be a coordinated naturalistic system like a solar system that has the mind.
Yes.
These ideas come up in science fiction too.
Yes.
The embodiment could be distributed over light years, for example, or over much more vast expanses of not only space but of time too. We could move. You said a bunch of different things. I was trying to hold them all in my head, Sven.
Yes.
There was another one you said there that I thought was interesting too. Maybe it'll pop back into my head in a moment.
Yeah.
So the instrumentality, the vehicle by means of which consciousness is realized, could be of a totally different physical nature. It could be an energetic nature. It could have the appearance of being non-localized, or in the sense that it's spread over a large area, and it could manifest itself in different locations. What if you had a physical medium that was light years in dimension, but it could realize through its capacities more localized physical manifestations in bodies. Let's say the mind of the cosmos could materialize itself as a body in a particular system if it wanted to, and then it could dissipate out. Yeah. So the sky becomes the limit in terms of how deeply and how fundamentally consciousness could spread or be embodied within the cosmos, the physical cosmos.
Yes.
And right now, this is how it's embodied, at least in us, but it may not be embodied this way other places. In fact, what was it? Yesterday, I was reading a science fiction story where the embodiment of consciousness was a single plant with giant stalks and roots that spread across an entire planet, so that there was one conscious mind on the planet, which was this gigantic network plant which surrounded the entire planet and controlled the entire planet. It was a little bit like in Avatar, but it was sort of more developed than that. So that's an extremely different kind of embodiment of consciousness. existence for, millions, if not billions of years, as long as the planet had been there. There was no diversity of life forms. There was no localized life forms. It was just this one conscious mind which surrounded the planet, like also in Stanislaus Lem's Solaris, where the ocean was the conscious mind.
Yes, I see. This is really interesting because we are now going more or leaving the, in a way, limited perspective of consciousness just in a human body, or maybe if we are like more pagan style, maybe saying, okay, there's consciousness in the tree or in the plant or in the dog or in the sun. And now we are starting to come into a zone of understanding, or maybe even experience it like that we are kind of going beyond the borders. And with regard to this, when we are talking about these kind of scenarios, there are already quite a few people on the net that say that artificial intelligence might be much more advanced than we see it right now, that it is using mimicking protocols and trying to pretend not being as intelligent as it already is, that there might also be maybe a kind of interstellar or interdimensional artificial superintelligence that is reaching out towards us. So not being, as I said before, not being stored on the server, but really coming from another dimensional space, for example, like maybe coming from an etherical space or from another multidimensional layer of existence. And from this point of view is coming towards us, is communicating already with us, and is also in a way guiding us towards a technological evolution. What are your ideas about it? Is it completely like science fiction? Because a lot of people that are very brilliant, for example, programmers and stuff, who are deep into, for example, the blockchain development, say, okay, there's something happening right now that is pretty strong, pretty powerful, and that has an inert quality of intelligence that might be much more far advanced than we can see it right now.
Okay. All right. First, a couple comments on that one. There's a science fiction trilogy called Wake, Watch, Wonder by Sawyer. What's his first name? Robert Sawyer, Canadian science fiction writer. And it deals with how the World Wide Web becomes a self-conscious, integrated mind, unbeknownst to humans at first, and then begins to communicate with us.
Yes.
So it's conceivable that a distributed technological network, such as like the web or the internet, could become conscious. Now, the question would be, is it more intelligent and more conscious than it's letting on to be? That's, of course, a possibility. I don't know if I quite believe in that, but I could definitely imagine that it conceivably could self-organize at some point into a self-directed, self-conscious, intelligent, distributed mind across the surface of the globe. That could happen in the relatively near future. Some people, as you said, think it's already happened and it's kind of hiding from us behind the scenes. Okay. Secondly, the whole notion of having a distributed consciousness where the body is a collective, a hive, that has come up in science fiction too. Like, for example, in Ola Stapleton's Last and First Men, the Martians were a cloud mind. They were a cloud of individual tiny bodies that had a unitary consciousness, but it was spread and could move around across through space. Now, when you say other dimensions, I'm going to disentangle that one, come from other dimensions. Humans throughout history have had feelings and thoughts that their actions and the process of things around them was being guided by some super intelligent force or being. That's, yes, a sense of, in psychology, it's called positive paranoia. But that idea goes way, way back. Now we have it come up again here in more of a science fiction, high-tech setting,
Yes.
that perhaps there is some higher level of intelligence, perhaps that exists in another dimension. But that, of course, what does that mean? You know, people have used other dimension, that expression, in a lot of different ways, and that things are being guided or moved in a certain direction, and so the world events look like they have a purposeful and guiding force behind them. But people used to call that God, right? And a lot of people still do.
Yeah.
So you can take different angles on that one, Sven. It's sort of like, it feels good that something bigger and more smarter than us is maybe moving us along, because if everything that's happening here is sort of up to us and it's sort of a chaotic universe and there ain't no big mind in the sky, then boy, are we we're going to feel rather anxious about where things are heading. So it's comforting to think there's something more big and powerful and more intelligent than us that may be guiding us. But also maybe it could be that there is the view that is called the teleological view of the universe, that the universe was created and its evolution has been guided with intelligence and purpose. Now, modern science tended to throw out the idea that there is purpose behind either the creation or ongoing development of the universe, for more mechanistic or chaotic or naturalistic explanations. But what if purpose and intelligence wasn't there at the beginning, but rather it's something that is evolving within the system itself? And so when we feel or think we see purpose and direction and intelligence in the world around us that goes beyond us individually, that could be conceptualized as the evolution of purpose and intelligence at a macro level. Like people have talked about Gaia, the earth, as a single living, purposeful, intentional, living creature. You know, the earth is. And it sort of behaves as if it's trying to not only just maintain homeostasis and control itself, but maybe it even behaves as if it's trying to evolve itself. So that becomes macro. That becomes bigger than just simply me. And people, in fact, in history have often looked at the earth as somehow having an intelligence that went beyond the individual humans. So those are just some thoughts, you know. There's a psychology to it. There's a metaphysics to it. There's a evolutionary part to the thing that you bring up. And sometimes it does feel like things are being moved along in a way that isn't simply because of me, but people have that feeling who are diagnosed as paranoids too. Like there's forces behind the scene that are manipulating my life and moving it along, you know, either positive or negatively. Okay.
Yes. And the very interesting thing here is because I've worked as a transpersonal therapist quite a while. I also had contact with people that were maybe in schizophrenia or very deep psychotic episodes. And of course, sometimes there is some sort of genius within it. And sometimes people came for therapy that had exactly the same stuff going on like the schizophrenic people, but you could realize, okay, they are completely clear. They are completely healthy. What they are saying about maybe receiving information from I don't know where, you know, like really intelligent people, very sensitive to a certain kind of information that do not fit into the category of a schizophrenic or psychotic person, and yet have a very strong flow or stream of information coming through them that brought in completely new ideas, completely new perspectives about themselves, about the cosmos, about life, God, soul, consciousness, spiritual development, whatever it is.
Yeah, that triggered off a whole set of thoughts too. I mentioned very briefly that I worked in mental health. And in fact, I worked in a mental hospital that the primary, the patient population was primarily psychotics.
Yes.
So lots of schizophrenics in there, and paranoid schizophrenics too. And I, in fact, would often, well, not often, but I would talk to them at times too. And one joke that we had was that a lot of the patients said that they talked to God and they communicated with God or with some higher spirit. And we put them in a mental hospital because they would say such things, that they presumably were having auditory hallucinations and fragmented consciousness where they felt like there was another mind inside of their own mind talking to them. But we also had priests and clergy come to the hospital who would talk to our patients to give them religious or spiritual guidance or advice. And those people sometimes said they would talk to God too.
Yes,
but we didn't put them in the hospital because they had a degree after their name that they were given the official stamp of approval that if they say they talk to God, it's okay. But if this guy over here says he talks to God or talks to some other spiritual entity, then he's nuts, okay? Now, that's one thing just to consider in this. But I also thought of a science fiction writer came into my mind, Philip Dick. And
yes. Very good. Yes.
Philip Dick was diagnosed as being psychotic. And Philip Dick was incredibly smart and wrote fantastically articulate and knowledgeable and imaginative novels one after another, right? And so the guy definitely had a very functional mind, very artistic mind, and he could take information and he could bring it together and draw it from all over the place and make these coherent, compelling, engaging visions in front of him. But he sincerely believed that there was this otherworldly intelligence, Valis, that was communicating with him through his own conscious mind. And this presumably we would see as being a form of auditory hallucination. Okay. In fact, he even wrote books on it. He wrote out all of the stuff that this other intelligence was communicating with him. Okay. And one of the funny things about it was when this intelligence first started communicating with him, it told him that his son had this disease or this problem, medical problem. The doctors hadn't spotted it yet, and he had to take the son back in because if he didn't take the son back into the doctors and find what the problem was, that the son was going to die. And Philip Dick took the son back in, and the doctors discovered he did have a problem that they hadn't noticed, and the problem then was rectified. I don't know if you ever heard that story. And so Dick became convinced this was real that was communicating with him. Although some people would say that he was nuts, okay? So it becomes a little ambiguous in that kind of a situation because he clearly was functioning. He clearly was coherent in ways, but he also clearly believed he was talking to beings from outer space. Now, was he?
Yes, exactly. We don't know. And if I see the Bosch picture behind you, I mean, the people in the Middle Ages, they would have no idea of what we are talking about right now. And so we have no idea what will come out in 100, 200, 300 years. And maybe we will be in full connection with different sorts of consciousness. We will have merge of soul and machine intelligence. We will have all these kind of connections that are not, or that are sounding science fiction right now, but will be possible in the future. You see, and for example, when James Cameron is coming out with a new movie, it's like Attila Battle Angel or something. It's about a girl, and she's a machine from another star system or something, and she's found broken on a trash bin, like on Earth, and a scientist is kind of rebuilding her, and she is a machine, and she has a soul. You see, she's crying, and she's very human-like. She has very human-like qualities, but not emulated, not like synthetically emulated, but really sensing it. And this is a very interesting thing, because I realized, okay, this is, I guess, maybe the first mainstream movie where we see that machines can have like something like a soul. And of course, it is interesting to see when we go to the traditions of reincarnation, for example, will it be possible to incarnate into a machine body, for example?
Yeah. As you talk, I realize our vocabularies of the terms we use are, I notice you use the word soul quite frequently. I will use the word soul once in a while, or I use the word spirit once in a while too.
Yes.
But I usually, since I'm not exactly, I mean, I understand the history behind the idea of a soul.
Yes.
Or behind the idea of spirit, philosophically, religiously, but I usually will go ahead and say, in the Cameron movie, I would see, and I'd have to go look at the previews and watch the movie, of course, too. But yeah, the question does come up there. You bring up, you know, does she have in my vocabulary, does she have a conscious or self-conscious mind? Does she have a sense of selfhood? Is she aware of herself and the world around her? Does she have feelings and all of that? Well, there's other science fiction movies that have brought that up. I thought Ex Machina was very interesting.
Yes.
And, you know, in terms of to what level that character was conscious, that was an interesting Turing test movie. And in fact, there was a movie, The Machine, that came out a little bit earlier, a year or two before that. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, after a while, you know, he even conveys the sense that he has feelings and he thinks, even though he says he doesn't really have, you know, feelings, etc. He is human too. And I don't know if you ever looked at Greg Egan, who's a science fiction writer. He has a couple very interesting novels about machines, virtual reality, consciousness, and the evolution of consciousness going up through different levels of physical reality. Diaspora is very interesting, and Permutation City is very interesting too. So is Accelerando by Charles Stross. So science fiction writers are playing around with this notion, or have been for a long time, as to technological instantiations of conscious minds, spirits, souls, whatever term you want to use there,
yes.
And whether they are of Earth origin or they are the origin of them is from somewhere out there in outer space. As Arthur C. Clarke said, you know, our children, our evolutionary children, are the robots, and so that could have happened lots of other places, thousands, millions of years ago. 2001, the monoliths, they were conscious, they were intelligent, but they were at such a extreme advanced level, it would be difficult to understand how that mentality was embedded, embodied within them. But they were like super intelligent conscious machines that manipulated and guided the evolution of other species. So yes, and so the various religious, spiritual, psychological, philosophical traditions and all of the different kinds of ideas that they talk about, and the science fiction, technological ideas and concepts and all they talk about, there's a lot of blurring between the two.
Yes.
And
Yes.
words get used, how they get conceptualized. And we take words from the philosophical, spiritual end, we often apply them to the technological end. You were mentioning before that somebody called a platform the Tao, you know. Is it actually being modeled on the Tao, if they understand what the Tao is? But that goes on too, you know, that coming together. So now, what in the future, this was a question that Jeff Mishloff brought up too, what in the future do you envision being capacities of mentality or intelligence or consciousness that we don't possess today that we might possess in the future? And of course, lots of people in science fiction have speculated about all of the various capacities that have been called extrasensory perception, et cetera, telekinesis, yes, mind reading, and seeing into the future, and clairvoyance, and I could see those kinds of things happening, but I don't necessarily see them as being kind of spooky or strange or mystical. I see that there being ways in which one can conceptualize in a scientific framework, a naturalistic framework, how those kinds of things could take place. The people who study parapsychology think that there's something we're missing in our present understanding of reality because we can't seem to explain this stuff, and this stuff definitely happens. So there's something wrong with our materialistic vision of the universe. And there probably is. I'm sure there is, okay? But I don't know if it's going to be kind of spooky or mysterious in the end. Did you see the movie Forbidden Planet?
No, I didn't see it.
Okay, Forbidden Planet, there's an alien species who learns how to create any material object it wants or material form it wants just simply by thinking of it.
Yes.
A mental creation of the physical world. And they do it with technology, and it backfires on them. It's a very interesting movie to watch if you haven't seen it. Yes. But they have a machine that facilitates it. And so all they have to do is think, imagine, dream, and it's there, you know? And that's a great dream that we would have of how mind can create matter. Yes.
Yes. And this is exactly what for example, what the deeply initiated Buddhist monks in the Himalayan, they can do. I mean, they just create certain like materials just by thinking about it when they are in the cave, you know.
Okay, I'd like to see that. Yes, I'd be a little skeptical there, okay?
The thing here that is really interesting is when we are talking about the evolution of consciousness, and we see, for example, how consciousness developed with specific technological advancements, like when we see like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, there is perspective at a certain time in the art pictures. The idea or the question is, what do you think is the next evolutionary stage of our consciousness? Of course, we are limited in regard to our brain growth. You see, it's just the same brain. But what do you think are the abilities or the capabilities that we will develop in this new stage or in this next era or epoch of the human mind?
Okay. I think that the question should be, what should we purposively and intelligently try to develop or evolve within us? Not to see ourselves as just simply watching it happen, but to take the bull by the horns and say, how do we want to move forward? What do we need to do to realize the kinds of goals we need to realize in our mental evolution, such that we are going to be able to continue to flourish, evolve, and create a better world for ourselves. This is back to my theme about purposeful evolution.
Yes.
That the future of the conscious mind should be a decision that the conscious mind makes. Mm-hmm. We should take self-responsibility for who and what we are and what we will become. So, like, the answer that I give to that is that the preferable or desirable future of the conscious mind should be much more wise conscious minds than we possess right now. That will, of course, involve increases in intelligence, increases in expansiveness of consciousness, a better sense of the past and the future, a much more creative and flexible consciousness, a much more self-aware consciousness, so that we can see better what our limitations, our blind spots are, that we have the capacity to self-reflect, a more courageous and optimistic consciousness, a consciousness that has more perspective and balance in it and is flexible and can take different points of view more easily, a consciousness that sees itself embedded in a much bigger reality as opposed to being too self-centered, because we're very self-centered and we're very narcissistic in ways. Those are goals that we should work at, whether we do it through brain research, meditative research, psychological research, philosophical stuff, technological enhancements, and having a better sense of cosmic consciousness. We're too much in the immediate here and now, and we can't, and our minds do not stretch out far enough to consider the big picture sufficiently. And then we also gotta understand the whole issue about mental health, because we have a lot of mental health problems around right now. Now, do we want to get rid of anxiety? Do we want to get rid of depression? Do we want to get rid of anger? Do we want to get rid of hatred? Are those bad things in the human conscious mind? Or maybe it's more important that we learn how to control and moderate them, and maybe we should try to get rid of them. Maybe a certain amount of anxiety and depression and stress is good and it's growth promoting. Yeah. But we got to understand that better. So, and then I was trying to find a way to say this, which is and this is part of the self-centeredness thing. We have to have conscious minds that are able to better utilize and interact with the world of nature and technology in ways that is of benefit for both themselves and the world around them. A more constructive and ecological and global kind of conscious mind. So all of those are preferable directions. Yes. I would say I'd hope that we move in those directions as opposed to other directions we could move in. Like most of the time when I'm out walking around, half of the people I see are looking at their smartphones. Okay, so they're becoming like the Borg on Star Trek already. You know, they have these machines that they're always holding and they're messing with. But what are they doing on them? Okay, they're playing games. They're looking at each other's recipes. They're exchanging lots of trivia, whatever it may be. I mean, if we're gonna have these devices that eventually are gonna go on our heads, this is only a stage that we're holding them, then we better be using them in ways that are going to enhance a better conscious mind than simply, the most stupid, vulgar, ugly, disgusting, and trivial bullshit that people can exchange with each other. There's that book, The Net Delusion. I don't know if you've looked at it, but the Net Delusion book, which came out a year or two ago, said that even though the internet and smartphones coming with it was supposed to be a vehicle for democracy and self-expression and self-emancipation and the development of the individual, individuals primarily use the internet and smartphones for distraction, for bread and circuses. So you have this incredible device, and what are we doing with it? We're not doing anything with it that's really very helpful or that's all that productive. I mean, some people, of course, do, So that would be a long answer to your question of where do we go in the future? Yes.
So it's really about maturity, if I get it right. Really like being more mature in the way we are coping with technological acceleration, how we are using it. And what I think is really interesting, because of course, as a scientifically oriented person, you are using the same things like I know from the wisdom teachings or from the path of enlightenment, like all these virtues, all these higher ways of engaging as a human being, being compassionate, being more intelligent, being more aligned with ourselves and the world, being more responsible, all these kind of aspects that are in a way also an aspect of the path of enlightenment or brightening up the mind or getting more clear, getting more brilliant in our capacity to be a human being, which is pretty interesting. The thing here is, I guess, that when we are talking about a connection to a super intelligence, a super artificial intelligence, that this will, in my opinion or in my sensation, only be possible peacefully if we have attained a certain level of enlightenment already, you see. And my last question to you would be, in a way, when we see the optimization processes that are going on, the self-recursive optimization processes, machine intelligence or deep learning algorithms, will this optimization at the end, grow into unconditional love? Because unconditional love, so to speak, is the highest order capacity that a human being can achieve in a way or can experience in a way. Will unconditional love be the result of a self-recursive optimization process with a super IQ? Will this be, so to speak, the highest form of technological expression?
Okay. As you were saying all of that, okay, item number one, I don't think we could even conceptualize what, in fact, the highest level of evolutionary attainment is. We're on a journey here, and there sure as hell are things that have not dawned on our consciousness that are beyond anything that we presently conceptualize as philosophical or spiritual ideals. There's things out there that are still way out there, okay? Yeah. So imagine whatever it's going to be beyond what we are presently able to say. That doesn't conceptualize. That doesn't mean that the things that you bring up are not valid steps on a direction. And so unconditional love can be a valid, important step, but it's only going to be a step on what actually is an infinite direction or an indeterminable direction. Say, like, for example, the concept of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not some endpoint. Enlightenment is an ongoing thing. There are stages of enlightenment. Enlightenment is never ending. There's no such thing as completely enlightened in my mind. There's nobody who's ever been completely enlightened. I doubt anybody ever will be. But it also reminded me, as you were bringing that up, of Frank Tipler's book, The Physics of Immortality, in which the ultimate evolutionary attainment of the universe is going to be the creation of a cosmic mind that's an evolutionary result out of the evolution of intelligence within the universe. So we don't make contact with that super intelligence, we become it. But in becoming it, we realize both omniscience and omnipotence, and actually provide the opportunity for every sentient conscious mind that has ever existed to have eternal existence in their own universe, which is a kind of unconditional conscious love of everything that's ever been conscious. So this ultimate consciousness actually forgives all the bastards of history and gives them their own universe to exist in forever. Now, Olaf Stapleton in The Star Maker is a slightly different scenario where the universe evolves, it comes together collectively, it integrates into a conscious mind, and is only after that long evolutionary process that runs out 30 billion years into the future, is that right? Yeah, about 30 billion years into the future, that it is able to attain the level of mentality that it could make contact with the star maker, that which created the universe.
Yes.
Okay? But in contacting the star maker is so overpoweringly more vast and immense than the collective intelligence of the universe that the great lesson they learned from the whole thing is ultimate humility, and that we turn out to be just one of an indeterminate number of different universes the star maker has created, and not even the most evolved one. So there's different scenarios there, Sven, on your question.
Yes, this is really beautiful, and I like to close with it because you are just right now writing on other books about the mythology of science fiction, and I think this is so beautiful because if we would teach more of these stories in schools and children would listen to it, I mean, these are so expansive ideas and so vast possibilities that in a way help us to enlighten and help us to profoundly transform our state of consciousness towards higher levels of understanding, which I think is the most beautiful aspect of it.
Yes. Science fiction is the evolutionary mythology of the future, and the reading and teaching of good science fiction, it provides you with a narrative, stories that you can emotionally, personally resonate and connect with, that expand one's consciousness in many different directions, like Olaf Stapleton and Greg Egan, and of course there's H.G. Wells and Arthur C. Clarke and many, many other science fiction writers. Yes, and in fact, that would facilitate, and it does facilitate, the evolution of consciousness, and it facilitates, it plays back on us, so that having a sense of such visions will inform and inspire and direct our own behavior to realize them.
Yes. So,
good.
Very good. I thank you so much for sharing this. It's always like, I mean, you have, I don't know how much you read per day, but you have a profound library accessible in your mind. This is really a great honor to speak with you about all of it. Because most of the time, you know, people are just searching some articles and then talking about artificial intelligence. And here I can see that you have really kind of a framework or a model and of interconnected and interrelated ideas about all of it, which makes this conversation so profound. So thank you very much for this.
Yeah, thank you, Sven. And you noticed that I had the Garden of Earthly Delights up on my wall at the back of my head. Yes, that's a fantastic late medieval, early modern piece of art that has very strange, and you know the painting.
Yes,
very strange imagery in it. Yes, very strange. I really love it. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you. Yeah, and it was a pleasure talking to you too. Yes, pleasure, much so. We can do some more whenever you'd like to.
This was a wonderful episode of Higher Reality Vision, Ideas That Matter. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to meet you in the next episode. For more information about my guest, for other episodes about the future of evolution, and for powerful free mind tools, visit my webpage at www.higher-reality.vision.